Happy Saturday and welcome to the Marketing MadMen. Nick Constantino here with the chef Arnaldo Castillo of Tio Luchos, and this is going to be a fun episode. We're going to break some new ground in this one. Obviously, talking food is something I love. Talking restaurants is something I love. But we're also specifically talking about Peruvian food and cuisine, and I am actually heading to Lima, and I will be doing the last segment of this show in Lima. So I think this is perfect timing. So, Chef, how are you, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. So let's start with a fun one. What do Americans get wrong about Peruvian cuisine? And why has it been a slower draw to get here than some of the other cuisines from around the world?
Man, that's a great question. And you know, not to open up Pandora's box of why there's misconstrued ideas about Peruvian food, but a lot of people because we're closer to like Mexico and we understand those flavors. Sometimes they kind of see other Latin American countries as like there's probably some similarities, and while there are some, with the seasonings or maybe the techniques or the ingredients, Peruvian food is completely different just from all the other Latin American cuisines. And sometimes it feels like an uphill battle when people are coming into the restaurant and we have a huge sign that says Tio Lucho's Peruvian culture.
Yeah.
And they come in and they're
ask for a margarita.
Or they're like, I want chips and salsa,
I think that's it's correct. That's ignorance. I think it's an ignorant thing. And I say that, go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, but for me, it's important that I wanted to create a platform to then talk and share Peruvian culture. So when someone comes in and they ask for those things, we say, we don't have that, but we do have, these homemade plantain chips with this huancaína salsa that I think would pair kind of well with what you're looking for,
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is ignorance towards geography and cultural weight, because like Peruvian, they're mountains, and people are starting to know that because of Machu Picchu and understand that, but like the continent where Mexico comes in and then starting South America are completely different terrains. There's just the coasts are different, the oceans are different, and I think what I found the most fascinating is, when you talk about something like lomo saltado, the Chinese influences that came and when they came, apparently, and I kind of did some research beforehand, but Peru was the first country to allow in South America to allow Japanese immigrants in, which has started an entire part of how sushi in Japan made their way over. So I think we teach history wrong in America, and we kind of just hyper focus on like white people in Europe, and we don't focus on how much the rest of the world is, which is a shame. I'm from New York City, man. Like you have everything you can imagine is on every corner in New York City, and like everything has its own little pocket of real things, right? And even more so, you mentioned your family's from North Peru, right? Which is probably completely different from South Peru. And Peru is not a huge country population-wise, and the cuisine changes so much. So I think one of the beautiful things about restaurants in America nowadays is I think we've gotten to the point where we're starting to kind of separate these things off. So you're seeing more regional cuisines come up, and you're seeing these things, which is just fun because, you mentioned Mexican food. Mexican food changes. Every province has completely different dishes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And to be fair, sometimes Mexican food copies Peruvian food. Because I've had agua caliente, which is pretty much a ceviche ripoff. Like these things are everything is...
You mean agua chile?
Fluid. Agua chile, there it is.
Yeah.
Agua caliente, because mine had a lot of hot sauce on it, so I just had to throw the caliente in it. I was on the beach in Cancun, and I had one, and it was just like a whim, and I just like the real hot sauce, and I just dumped half the bottle on it, and I ate it, and I won't. It was orgasmic. It was pretty close. So talk about Tio Luchos. Pop up first. Talk about how you came up as a chef. Because again, you kind of see the celebrity chefs and their popularity has waned, and it's come down to the people who kind of grew up community cooking, and that's been a more forefront. So talk about how you became a chef, and then how Tio Luchos came to be.
Yeah. So I've been in the restaurant industry since I was 15, and I've been cooking professionally for about 10 years now. Okay. And, I've been lucky enough to work with some really talented chefs, chefs from the Southeast region. And I've been able to learn so much about techniques and seasonality and ingredients. And that was me going to school. I didn't go to culinary school. I just worked in kitchens and kind of picked up my skill set that way. And, eventually I was working for a restaurant group here in Atlanta. It was a great corporate job, and actually that quarantine happened, and that's when I started to dig into Peruvian food. I wanted to cook.
Wow.
I'm at the apartment, I'm stuck, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to just cook Peruvian food, the food that I missed growing up, and I was sharing that with my girlfriend, who's now my wife.
Okay, congrats.
And thank you. And that was sort of the start to my pop-up La Chingana, where I started doing tasting dinners around the city of Atlanta. and was just focused on introducing Peruvian food, sharing culture, because now I'm cooking in front of guests. I'm, talking about the inspiration behind the dishes. I'm also talking a little bit about the history behind it, because I love just going down these rabbit holes and learning about techniques and ingredients. And that was La Chingana. So that was my pop-up. And my idea was I need to create a platform and then transition into a brick and mortar.
Okay. And so you had that mapped out, that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, that was my strategy.
So the pop-up scene is probably really misunderstood. I think Atlanta got into it, and then now it's just too much. There's just pop-up. Talk a little about that pop-up scene. So this is probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago?
Not even, man.
Not even 4 years ago?
2021.
Okay, so talk about the pop-up scene. Talk about what it was like in Atlanta. Talk about why you saw that opportunity, because I think it's a little bit misunderstood.
Yeah, well, the pop-up scene, it gets a little bit oversaturated because you have a lot of people that are coming in and they wanna cook food that they're inspired to share with guests and the city. But I've always told some of these pop-up chefs that I've done collaborations with, like, make sure you have a strategy. Like, if your goal is to open up a restaurant, well, how are you going to get to that point? And you have to think of opening a restaurant, or even running your own pop-up holistically. Like, how, you got to make sure that you are marketing yourself on social media platforms.
Sure. Oh my goodness.
You gotta make sure that
front of house, back of house, businesses, ordering, balance sheets. Like, it's not an easy task.
I was lucky that I already was an executive chef when I left my job to go into pop-up. So I already had an understanding of how restaurants run and how to manage a staff. So when I started doing my tasting dinners, it was just me, my wife, and then I would, hit up some homies to help me, execute the dinner. But I love seeing pop-ups come up, because that's where they're sharing, the regional cuisines that they grew up with. Some of my favorite pop-ups right now are Laotian food, Indian food, etc. So you don't see those restaurants being represented.
Yeah.
So it's up to the pop-ups. That's why it was up to me to create La Chingana and share Peruvian food, because no one was doing it right.
Yeah, it's crazy. And was there a point where you knew it was time to go brick and mortar? I know you said it was your plan, but was there like a crossover? Like, holy crap, people really dig this? Was there that moment? Do you remember when that moment was, or was it kind of a slow process?
No, that was my goal. It was to open up a restaurant, but I needed to create the platform first, and so that's why I started with the pop-up. And then, my personal goal was to create generational wealth for my family to have one day, And so now I have a baby girl. She's 5 months now. And,
you're in the thick of it.
That was the idea, is that I had these real life examples in front of me. My godparents in Piura in northern Peru have had a restaurant for almost 60 years, and that's how they've been able to provide for their family. And that was inspiring for me. And my business partners and et cetera have all been in the restaurant game for years. And so I saw that as a way to create generational wealth, and that's my goal. Love it.
You very rarely hear that, at least people that honest, like, you had a plan, you stuck to it. Most people, I just want to open a restaurant, and they go into it not knowing a clue of what's going to happen and how important this all is. I love, and look, a lot of this has come to the forefront, like a show like The Bear, where like it's just over exaggerated as to how it's happening. But one thing that I know to be true, if the dishwasher's off that day and your dishes aren't clean, you're screwed. Like, there's so much that goes into a restaurant working, like so many little nuanced things that people don't understand. And the expectations have changed, right? Everybody wants a farm to table, holistic, that's organic experience. And like, sometimes the cuisine doesn't even call for that. Sometimes the cuisine doesn't need to be that. One of the things I loved about New York was like, no one got into all that stuff. Like, the best places were just the Dominican family that came fresh over and was just cooking what they knew to cook, right? And Atlanta has it. Buford Highway has plenty of spots that are just exactly that. But I think we've kind of gone away from that. So early days, so Tio Luchos, talk about designing, talk about picking location. How involved were you in all that stuff? How much did you get of what you wanted? Where did you make sacrifices? Like, how did that all work?
Oh, man. Well, I was involved from the ground up for Tio Luchos. When my business partner and I toured the facility, we were like, my idea was to transition my pop-up into the brick and mortar. So I was going to take La Chingana and the style of food that I was doing there, which was, a little bit contemporary, not the traditional Peruvian plating. It was more about taking Peruvian flavors and just elevating in a different way, using, whatever was seasonal, or just working with local purveyors and whatnot. And I've done a little bit of that at Tio Luchos, but when we first came in, I was like, this is a huge space. I was picturing something, with like, 6, 7 tables, like a little bar counter.
Yeah.
You know, something
an extension of the pop-up.
Yeah, something a little bit more intimate. And, you know, I walk into Tio Luchos and I was like, this is like a 150-seater restaurant. Like, this is huge.
Yeah.
And so I went home and just changed my business plan and decided to open up something that was going to be a little bit more, you know, small plates, shareable plates, and the concept just slowly, you know, transformed to what it is now and evolved into Tio Luchos. And, you know, I named it Tio Luchos after my father. He was also a cook. And that was a big inspiration for me. You know, the menu, I wanted to tap into the freshness of what Peruvian food is when it comes to, you know, ceviches, T'i you know, which is like a Peruvian crudo. And, you know, and then working with the local farmers to bring in that produce and showcase what they got growing, you know?
Yeah, I think with a restaurant of that size, you got to be more to more people because you got to fill more seats. So you need the people that come in just for the ceviche, right? Or the crudo, and then they have some pisco with it or something like that. It's just different. So that's awesome. So when we get back from the break, we're going to go talk through this a little bit more, what you've learned over the past 2 years or so from it, what a Friday and Saturday night look like, what people order in their drinks. We're going to really set the stage, and then we'll transition back more over into what the heck I'm going to do when I'm in Peru. So I make sure I cover the right thing. So you've been listening to the Marketing MadMen on Extra 106.3, and we will be right back.